Vayigash love Yehuda. What happens here? It says we have to put it into perspective. We have the end of last week's parsha. Yosef, as far as anyone knows, is an Egyptian. He's not Yosef. He's the second most powerful man in the world. The most powerful man in the world is Pharaoh. Right? It's the largest kingdom in the world. It's the most powerful and advanced kingdom. It's the only one that has food during a famine. And the brothers come for food, and they go through this whole long story the last few weeks. And finally, Yosef purposely sets up Binyamin, the youngest brother, to be arrested. And he arrests him and puts him in jail and says, I'm not giving him back to you, right? Unless you go back to Israel and bring back your father. So that way I know that you're not criminals. I don't know how that really made a lot of sense, but that was his goal, right? The brothers don't know who it is, and they know that now Yosef is gone, and now Binyamin is gone. Those are the only two sons of Rachel, right? So that now Yosef and Yaakov, who loved Rachel the most, is going to be heartbroken because both of his children from his wife who died are not going to be around. So Yehuda takes charge as the main brother, and he goes and he challenges Yosef. So now you have like the head of the Jewish people, who are certainly a powerful group, but they're not Egypt, standing in the court, right, in the castle of Joseph, and thinking that he's now confronting this guy to let my brother go or else. Right? That's basically what he's doing. And up until this point, they're very deferential to him. Whatever he says, they do it. All they want is to have peace and to get their food and to get out of there. They're not looking to take over. They're not interested in being spies. They don't want to go to war. They don't want anything that's not theirs. They just want to get some food to feed their family and leave. Right? But this whole thing goes on. Now Yehuda says, if I don't do something, they're going to take our youngest brother, and we won't get him back. So he decides to have a confrontation. So it begins with the confrontation. Vayigash alav Yehuda. Vayigash is a powerful word. It's a very strong word. It means that he confronts him. Literally, it means that he comes forward to him. But in this tense, it means that he puts himself in his face, like right up to his face, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And it says Vayomer, and he says, Be Adoni, please, my master, Yidaber na avdecha, listen to the words of your servant, which is himself. Davar ba'ozne Adoni, and I'm going to speak into your ears. V'al yachar apcha, do not be angry, ba'avdecha, with your servant, with himself. Why? Ki chamocha kafaro, because to me, you are as the same as Pharaoh. So we have to understand what he's saying. First thing is he's having a very strong confrontation, but yet he still calls himself his servant. He's still subservient to him, right? He's saying, you're in charge, but you've got to listen to me. And he said, I'm speaking right into your ears. In other words, there's no middle ground here. There's no more diplomacy. Up until now, it's been diplomacy. Remember, they think he's an Egyptian, and he doesn't understand Hebrew. So they're using a translator. They're speaking to a translator who's translating. Right now, they don't realize that Yosef understands what they're saying in Hebrew, but they think he doesn't. So now Yehuda says, "I'm going to speak directly to you," as he feels. Even if this guy doesn't understand a word I'm saying, he's going to feel what I'm confronting him, and he's going to have to make a choice. Right? That's what he's saying. But he uses this expression, right? He said, I want you to do what I say. Don't get angry, because to me you're like Pharaoh. Now Rashi finds this a very strange statement, because what does it mean you're like Pharaoh? All right, so Rashi gives us 4 answers, and the answers are very odd. He says, if it's in the second line of the Rashi, I'll read it for you. Ki chamocha kafaro, for to me you are like Pharaoh. Chashuv ata bi'enei kamelech, you are in my eyes like a king, even though you're not. Zehu pshuto, that's the simple explanation, right? Don't get angry with me, right? Even though I'm being confrontational, because to me you're like a king. That's a simple understanding. V'midrasho, however, on a deeper level, sofecha lakos alav v'tzras k'mo shalachach paro yadezi kenaso sara ala laila echa shiachba. He says, you know what Rashi says it means when he says this? He says, who do you think you are? You know what happened when Pharaoh himself took my grandmother Sarah to sleep with her? He got a disease. God gave him a disease so that he wouldn't do it. He said, you're no better than him. Right? Now he's different. It has a different meaning, right? Now it's not so complimentary, right? You think you're the most powerful man in the world. Well, God's with me. And when Pharaoh decided he was going to mess with my grandmother, God didn't let him do it. Right? He says, and you're no better than Pharaoh, so the same thing will happen to you. That's one. Davar acher, another thing, Rashi says, Ma Paro goes every enu mekayim, just like Pharaoh makes laws and nothing comes of them. Maftiach ve'enu osa, right? I'm certain that they don't happen. Af atachen, you also. In other words, Pharaoh can make whatever rule he wants, but he's going to die. And when he dies, some other king will come and change the rules. Like you go and say, I'm Pharaoh, you better do what I say. Yeah, you're a man, human. Like, who are you? Pharaoh is, just like Pharaoh can't keep his word, you can't keep your word. Right? That's what he's saying to him. Right? Another negative, right? V'chizahu simas ayin shemarta l'shum eincha alav. Dover acher. Then he says another one. Ki chmocha Pharaoh. What does it mean? You're like Pharaoh. Im takeniseni aharogosach viat adonecha. Right? And just like Pharaoh in the end can die, you can die. Mm-hmm. Right? So he's threatening him. So here you have one opinion is, just like Pharaoh is great and he's the head of the world, so too, in my eyes, you're the head of the world. Another one is, just like Pharaoh's a nobody, God, he can't stand up to God, you're a nobody. Right? Well, we have a concept in the Torah called ayin panim the Torah, 70 meanings for every word. That is to tell you that you can learn an enormous amount from every word, but it's pretty rare that the different meanings are opposite. Because it's, if you want to say that Yehuda is telling Yosef, who doesn't know he's Yosef, don't get angry because to me you're like a king. He's trying to soft talk him. So he's not going to say, Paro can die, you can die too. Paro says things, nothing comes of it. You say things, nothing comes of it because God's with me. They're very opposite, right? So how can both of them be right? Because when you have all these different opinions in the Torah, they're all correct. It's a matter of understanding them. You can't have opposites be correct. So this is going to give us a bit of a vision on what was really going on when we hear this. When we hear these four opinions from Rashi, we've got to say, if all four are correct, how can they be correct? Either he's speaking nicely, or he's speaking roughly. Either he's trying to bribe him by like soft talking him, or he's trying to threaten him. Can't he do both in the same sentence, same three words? So he says as follows. As I told you before, the brothers did not know Yosef understood Hebrew. They thought he was an Egyptian. So they're talking through an interpreter, right, who translates their words. Now, we always know, you see it at the UN all the time, when somebody translates the words of someone else, they can translate it in many ways, and the translation is still true. In other words, you can make a translation depending on how you say a word, or what word you use. It can be soft or it can be harsh, right? I can speak to you. Let's say you do something wrong. I can talk to you about it, and I can say it in a way that makes you feel good or makes you feel bad. And I can say the same words. It can be in my tone. It can be what words I use specifically. So here, what Yehuda is saying is the following. He says, up until now, I was speaking through an interpreter. And the interpreter, when I say something like, to me, you're like Pharaoh, the interpreter could be saying to you, oh, just like Pharaoh's king, you're king. Or the interpreter could be saying to you, just like Pharaoh will die, you're going to die. Mm-hmm. Right? I have no idea what he's saying to you. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk right into your ears. I'm going to talk from my heart to your heart. And you're going to have to understand what I'm saying to you. And if you might not understand the words, but you'll get the feeling. You'll understand the feeling of what I'm saying. Right? That's what's going on here. It's not that all four are true. He's saying all four of these things could be any one of these that your interpreter could be telling you I said. And I don't necessarily mean three of them. Right? Which one he really means, we don't know at this point. Does he mean that just like Pharaoh, gets up and makes statements, and nobody listens to him anyways, no one's going to listen to you either? You're a big shot, only in your own head you're a big shot. Or you really are, right? Which is true. So here you have Pharaoh, you have Yosef, and he's being told that by Yehuda. So Yehuda is now saying to him, no more of this diplomacy. I'm talking right into your ears. I'm going to talk right to you. Now, as far as he knows, he doesn't understand what he's saying, but he understands the emotion, right? So it's like they tell a story, and I don't know all the details. I don't even know if it's a true story, but conceptually it's true. And they say that one time there was a problem with the Russian government. The Russian government wanted to implement laws that would affect the Jewish community. One of the laws, for instance, was that you had to teach in yeshivas, you had to teach Russian language, and you had to teach in Russian, right? In a yeshiva, where all these guys come from shtetls, they only spoke Yiddish. But they were trying to Russianize the people, Sovietize the people, right? This was before communism. But they wanted them to become more national. So they made this law. So the rabbis went to fight it. So it says that they go to court, and the Chafetz Chaim comes in, and he wants to speak, but he doesn't speak Russian. He only speaks Yiddish. So he gets up and he starts speaking in Yiddish. And the judge has no idea what he's saying. But at the end, the lawyer representing the Jewish people that were there, gets up to present his case. And the judge says to him, you don't have to say anything. I hear what this man is saying to me. I can feel what he's saying and how much it affects him. I'm going to do what he says. He had no idea what he said. But he knew that he didn't want them to do this and how meaningful it was to him. Because he could feel the emotion in his words. Right? When you're talking to somebody, even if they don't understand exactly what you're saying, if you're talking from your heart, it enters their heart. They feel it. Right? And that's what happens here. So Yosef is telling him, that I'm going to talk to you man to man now. No more, Yehuda, no more diplomacy, no more, translations, no more you're the king and I'm a regular guy. I'm going to talk to you one to one because you're taking my brother. This is a big deal now. Now this is no longer playing games and and putting our money back in our bag and stuff like that. This is a real issue. So that's why it starts that way, right? So, but what we have really is a confrontation between titans. I mean, imagine how we all talk about how John Kennedy stood up to the Russians with with the Cuba Missile Crisis, and how people really thought there'd be missiles in their houses the next day, they'd be bombed, right? And how he stood up to him, and nobody thought he'd be able to do it, right? And he did it, right? The confrontation that they had, one with the other, like this, the strong confrontation was like that. It was enormous. You have the most powerful leader in the world, the second most powerful leader, right? He's Joseph, who is now the second of Egypt. And then you have the head of the Jews. And they're having this confrontation, right? A very heated confrontation, and you don't know what's going to happen. But whatever whatever is going to happen is going to be extraordinary. It's going to be enormous, right? And that's exactly what happens. So it goes on, and just in the English it says, right? That you're taking our brother from us. One of the brothers is dead, meaning Yosef, right? And the father only has one other one. So he says, so you can't take him. You have to give him back. And it was when we went up to your servant, my father. He told your father what he said. He says, go buy food, but don't leave your brother behind. Right? And then at the bottom of the page it says, and now if I come to your servant, my father, and my youth is not with us, I'm not bringing my little brother back. Since his soul is now bound up in his soul, it'll happen that when he sees the youth is missing, he'll die. You're going to kill our father, right? And he brought down the hoariness of your servant, our father, in sorrow to the grave, right? And then he appeals to him. Now, if you look at the beginning of chapter 45, Yosef responds, right? So it says, so you can imagine this. Now, there's many ways of understanding it, but here you have Yehuda telling Yosef, you can't do this. If you take our brother away and we go back to our father will die. We're prepared to fight you right now to the death to get our brother back, because you can't do this to our father. You can't do that, right? Now Yosef is saying, who are you to talk? You did it to me. You sold me. You didn't care about your father then. I was your father's favorite son, and you took me and you were going to kill me, and then you didn't kill me. You sold me down to Egypt as a slave, right? And now you're telling me that I've got to be nice to you and not take your brother because it'll kill your father? You didn't think your father would die when you did that to me? You're so full of emotion and compassion for your father? That's what you're doing? So it says, now Yosef cannot restrain himself in the presence of all who stood before him. So he said, everyone should leave. And no one remained with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he says, in a loud voice, and all of Egypt heard, and everyone in the house heard. And he said, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? Now this is a very strange statement. Right? He understands that here he's given this confrontation, and he finally admits who he is. I'm Joseph. Why does he ask if my father's still alive? He just told him, if you don't send my brother back, my father's going to die. So is his father alive? Yeah, he's alive. Right? He says, we went back to my father. He said, go back down there and get the food, but we have to bring our youngest brother. Well, if you bring your youngest brother, don't leave him behind, because it'll kill me. Now we're going to go back without our youngest brother and with the food, and our father's going to die. Then Joseph says, well, I'm Joseph. Is my father dead? Right? So he's doing exactly what I said to you. He's saying, I'm Joseph. What are you telling me he's going to die? Is my father dead? You did it to me. My father didn't die. So how come we can't do it to him? Right? In other words, if you care so much about your father, why did you sell me away like that? Yeah. So the commentaries tell us that what he's really doing is that he's trying to repair the damage. Yosef understood that on a, remember, this is a global level. You're talking about Yosef. Right? Yosef had to end up here. This had to happen. Yosef had to be sold. Yosef could not be killed. He had to be sold. He had to end up in Egypt. He had to become the powerful person he was, so that the Jews could come down powerfully into Egypt and move there, because we were going to be slaves in Egypt. That was going to happen. So this had to happen. Right? When we say that we don't believe in destiny for us, we believe we have free will. That's when that's true, unless there's something that is so enormous that if we don't do it, it'll change the world. Right? So if if Mr. X lives or doesn't live, probably it won't change the world. But if Joseph doesn't go down to Egypt, the world would have changed. It was not possible. That's why when the brothers wanted to kill him, they couldn't kill him. Right? They wanted to kill him. And they threw him they said, okay, we won't kill him. We'll put him in a pit with scorpions and snakes instead of kill him. Well, that's killing him, right? So why didn't they kill him? Because God can control the scorpions and the snakes. He'd keep them so they wouldn't bite him. Because Yosef had to go. This had to happen. So now, Yosef is saying, it had to happen, but you still did wrong. And I have to repair that damage. I have to help you repent. Right? As the brother, part of my task is to fix the damage that you did in the spiritual world. By your selling me and your intent to kill me, right, that had damaged the spiritual world of God in this world, because you're not supposed to do that. So I'm going to help you repent. So when they stand up and are prepared to die to save their brother, Yosef says, you fixed it. Now I see you're different people. You would not allow your brother to be left behind. You care. You've changed. And then he says, now I'm Joseph. Right now he tells them who he is, because he's done his job. In fact, he did his job, but according to our understanding, he didn't do it well enough. If you read in Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'Av, there's the story of the 10 martyrs. You know, the story of the martyrs, these great rabbis who got killed by the Romans over a few generations. You know, Rabbi Akiva and all these different rabbis. So it says that when they were going to kill them, the Romans said, we're doing this because of what you did to Joseph. Because you sold Joseph as a slave, we are judging you for death. And these 10 rabbis are representing the brothers. There are only 10 brothers involved, because Benjamin was too young. So you are going to be, we're going to kill you because your brothers deserve to die for selling their own brother. And that's what the Romans said. Now that was a lie. It was a farce, right? But you see, then it was a message from God that repair hadn't been full, even though Yosef tried to, but he didn't fully do it. And it says that's why that happened, right? Why the 10 martyrs were killed, for specifically that reason, because of what happened. Yosef repaired some of it, but he wasn't able to fully repair it. And that's why it says here, Joseph cannot restrain himself. Joseph wanted to. He wanted to hold himself back. And because if he would wait longer, he could have repaired all the damage. But he couldn't. Physically, he couldn't do it. He was a human being. And here he sees his brothers in such pain because of what he's doing. It's like, when you have a kid, and sometimes your kid does something wrong, you have to say, okay, you're not allowed to go to the baseball game with your father for the next 3 games. So your father goes to a game, and the kid's like despondent. And the second game is, and by the time it's time for the 3rd game, you're in more pain than the kid. You can't handle this, right? That's what happened with Yosef. Yosef got to a point where he couldn't handle being this ogre to his brothers, right? Because he's a compassionate person. He finally had to say, I know I'm doing this for the right reason, but I can't handle this anymore. Look what's going on with them. He had to tell them. So that's why he tells them, but he tells them a little too early, it seems, and therefore all the damage wasn't fixed, but a lot of it was fixed because of what they went through. Now another thing is the commentaries tell us in the Medrash that Yosef made a big mistake, because Yosef says here that he tells everyone, remove everyone from before me, right? He tells all of the people in the court, right, in the palace, they have to leave. All the servants, all of the people who work there, everyone has to leave. All the Egyptians have to leave. And left him with his brothers, right? Because he's going to tell them. And why does he do that? Because he doesn't want to embarrass his brothers. Because it was an enormous embarrassment. The brothers think he's dead. They think they killed him and the story's over. We don't have to worry about him anymore. We buried him in New Jersey under the Giant Stadium. We don't need him anymore. He's gone, right? But what happens is now he shows up, and he's the most powerful guy in the world, and he's going to kill us, right? I mean, they don't know. We're going to kill him. Maybe he's going to kill us now, right? They're afraid, right? So Joseph doesn't want to embarrass them in front of everybody, so he tells everyone to leave, and he's going to tell them straight who he is. But he doesn't want to. He wants to do it without them being embarrassed in public, because to embarrass someone in public is a big deal. He doesn't want to do that. So he tells everyone to leave, and then he tells his brothers who he is, and he knows that they're going to be really embarrassed now, right? I mean, humiliated in front of him. But the Medrash says that he made a mistake, because his brothers tried to kill him. Who's to say they won't do it again? There's nobody there. Only the 10 brothers and him. The 10 brothers can kill him right then. Wasn't he afraid that they'd kill him? That's the Medrash says. How could he do that? We understand you don't want to embarrass them, but to what extent? To your life? You're going to give up your life rather than embarrassing them? That's what it sounds like. So you have this dichotomy, this two ethical things going at the same time. One is he doesn't want to embarrass his brothers. The other one, he's got to take care of himself, and his brothers could kill him, and they have a history of trying to kill him. It's not like they never tried. They tried. So how can he do such a thing, right, to allow it to happen? From here we can understand how severe it is in Jewish tradition to embarrass somebody. It's one thing, I would say 95% of the time that we embarrass people, we do it by mistake. We don't mean to embarrass somebody, right? You make a joke, right, and you realize a person's sensitive about it. They don't think it's funny, Somebody is, let's say, overweight, or somebody is short, or whatever, and it's nothing to do. Let's say they're short. It's nothing to do with them. They didn't make themselves short. They're just short. And you make a short joke. You think they don't mind. They know I like them and I care for them and I respect them. It's just we're having fun, So and then it turns out that they're actually very sensitive and they get embarrassed, right? So if you do that, it's only you and them, right? So they'll get a little upset with you, and then they'll realize you didn't mean anything by it, and they'll forget it most of the time. But if you do it in front of a crowd, right? Like you go to see a comedian, right? Then that's public humiliation. You probably will never live that down. You'll feel like you'll never live it down, and you'll feel hatred towards that person for a long time because they humiliated you in public. The Talmud says it's like killing someone. Humiliating someone in public is like killing them, and therefore Yosef felt that this was how important it is. Even if it puts him in a situation where they could do this, he was still worthwhile for him to push them out, because everyone else out, because he didn't want to embarrass his brothers, even though it was in that situation. This is a lesson for us to understand. Right? Like I tell my wife sometimes, like we went on a cruise. So on the cruise they have a comedian. So you want to see a comedian. So I always have a rule. I'll go to see a comedian, right, as long as it's an appropriate comedian. But then I'll go to see him, but I won't sit in the front, because they'll always pick on you, especially if you look like me. Right? You walk in, you look like a rabbi with a yarmulke. Immediately, I'm the first guy they're going to start up with. Well, one time we were there and we had dinner, and the dinner took longer than it was supposed to, we thought. And we walked in, and there were only seats in the front 2 rows. And I wanted to see the guy. He was a clean comedian, and he was supposed to be very good. I go in right in the front row, and I'm there about 10 seconds before he starts up with me, right, immediately. But it was a good one because he was clean, and he wasn't like insulting. He just used me as sort of to talk to and as someone to start up with. So he was funny because he says to me, you look like a rabbi. You a rabbi? And I said, yeah. And here he is a black man, like in his 30s. He's wearing a black suit, a white shirt, and a fedora. Right? He looks like a rabbi more than I look like a rabbi. I was in like more leisurely clothes. I had a yarmulke, and of course I have I look like it, but so I'm saying, I looked at him and I say, wait a minute, I look like a rabbi? I said, I understand you're a black man, but you look like a rabbi, right? And from then on it was finished. I was in trouble the whole night. But he was actually very nice, and then he gave us a copy of the video. But it was it was right, that's what happens, right? Because I know that when I go, and if they would pick on me, and they are tough comedians, then they'll humiliate me, right? And it's not me who cares so much; it's my position. They're embarrassing Torah. They don't know me. For all they know, I might be the nicest guy in the world, or I might be the meanest guy in the world. They have no idea. But I represent something to them. Because, right after me, he went after like a Hindu guy with a turban on, right? So that's just how that is. But it's very important. So that's why he did that, and he asked them to leave. And now, why does he say then, is my father still alive? If he's not trying to give them a hard time, right? Now he's saying, I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? Is he's making the point to them, of course, that why am I treating you the way I'm treating you? Why did I do these crazy things? You imagine they show up to buy food, so he brings them in. He treats them differently. He knows who's who. He knows their names. He knows how old they are. He tells them to line up by age. Right? They don't know, how does this guy know all this? He must know magic. And the next thing you know, they buy food and look in their bag and their money's returned. Right? Then the next time they do it, a cup is inside the bag. Right? They don't know what's going on here. Like, the whole thing is weird, right? All they want to do is go. Like, imagine you go to Walmart to buy a case of water, and you walk out and the money's inside, and the guy stops you at the door and says, "Did you pay for that?" "Yeah, I paid for that." "Well, let me see your receipt." "You don't got a receipt." "Oh, the money's sitting there," right? So, right, you're going to get in trouble, right? That's what happens to them. They don't understand why. So in this case, when he says, "I am Joseph," is my father still alive? He's telling them why I was acting so strange, because I'm Joseph, right? That's why it's so strange, because you're not dealing with an Egyptian stranger. I know everything about you. I'm Joseph. Second is, my father's still alive, was to tell them, all of these things I did to you was to repair the damage you did spiritually by selling me, so that you should know your father's still alive today, because he didn't die when you sold me. He's not going to die if I take Binyamin. I'm doing this for a reason, for your best. It doesn't sound like it, but it is, and that's why he does that, right? And then he goes through, he has a whole talk about what's going to happen, how he got there, and what happened to him, and so forth. And then it says that Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh hears about it, and he tells him, "Go back and get your father. Go get your father." So it says, if you look on 355, like verse 16, the news was heard in Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come, and it was pleasing in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of his servants. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this. Load up your animals, go directly to the land of Canaan. Bring your father and your household and come to me. I'll give you the best of the land." So here, Pharaoh tells them, take wagons, take lambs and cows and everything you want, right? Go back to Israel, give them all the stuff, and then bring your father and all his stuff back. They're going to live in the best part of Egypt. I'm going to give them a great life, because I appreciate Yosef and what he's done for us. And if Yosef is good for us, then the Jews are good for us, right? And we want all of you. So come on down. That's what he's doing. So it says, the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons, according to Pharaoh, and he gave them food, and to each of them he gave clothes, right? And then and he sent a message to his father. He gave him donkeys and all kinds of things. So here's a very interesting medrash. The medrash tells us that Yosef was sending a signal to his father, because he knew that his father never gave up hope for him, even though the brothers told the father, "Here, look, here's his coat. It's covered with blood. He got eaten by an animal," right? For some reason, Yaakov said that he didn't know that Yosef was alive, but he couldn't stop mourning. In other words, it's normal to mourn. There's a law that says that for a year people mourn. In other words, that for a year it's really painful. After a year, you lose someone you love. It hurts, but it's not the same. It's like it goes from color to black and white. The pain is still there, but it's not the same. But with all of these years, decades go by, Yosef's gone, Yaakov, it didn't change. So Yaakov knew something's wrong. Like, it's not normal, right? I'm not getting a prophecy that Yosef's alive, but I'm not getting the peace that happens over time. So something's wrong, right? Yaakov was very astute, and he was a prophet. So he knew that something's missing here. So Yosef doesn't want his father to die of a heart attack when he finds out that Yosef's not only alive, but he's like he's the vice president of the country, right? So, and that he's been doing all this. So he has to send a message to his father, so his father can sort of hear it. So first the Medrash says that there was he had a niece. His brother Usher, right? I had a daughter.
Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah was her name, and she could sing. So he sent her to go sing to Yaakov that Yosef has been found and Yosef is alive, but like sort of in a nice voice so that he would, like be thinking he's listening to a song and start to get the message a little. And then he sent him a secret message. And he sent the message was as follows, and it's a weird message. He says that the last thing that Yaakov and Yosef did together, when Yaakov sends him out to go find his brothers, is that they were studying Torah. And they studied the laws of what's called the Egla Arufa. Now, the Egla Arufa is where you have two cities, and you have guys who would go from city to city, like travel around, let's say selling things or buying things, whatever, right? And they would be traveling. So a guy comes to this city, and he does his business, and he walks to the next city to do his business. So this is going on, right? One day they go out and they find a dead man on the road in between the two cities who was killed. He got caught by bandits, and he was killed. And they look and they see it's one of these Jewish guys, right, who was going from our city to the next city. So the Torah says that you have responsibility for this person. You can't just send somebody out, right, where he can get killed. You have to be responsible for people when they come to your city to help them. So this says then they have to measure where city is he closer to, the next one or this one. Whichever one he's closer to has to assume responsibility for his death. And they do a ritual called the Egla Rufa, where they take this young cow, they break its neck, and they say, as they wash their hands over it, it says that we have no we had no intention for the murder of this person, and they're assuming some responsibility, but they're atoning for the responsibility because they messed up. But it wasn't on purpose, right? And they weren't malicious. They just didn't do what they were supposed to do, right? So they have this. So that's called the Egla Arufa. Egla is a young calf. Arufa is torn. His neck is torn. So Egla and Agala, which means wagons, are similar, right? Egla, Agala sounds the same. Letters are very similar. So it says that Yosef sent wagons to his father. So when his father would see the wagons, he'd think it is Yosef. It really is him. It's not a fake. He knows what we learned together, and he's sending me a message so that I should realize that that's what it is. He's sending me an Agala to remind me that we studied together Egla, right? But I think that that's a little crazy. I mean, that's a medrash, and the medrashes aren't crazy. But I mean, think about it. If he hasn't been with him for decades, and he's learning with him about a cow, and he sends him a wagon. What does the wagon got to do with the cow? I know the words are similar, but it's been decades. Right? How does one tie to the other? Like that would be, Joseph says, I don't want to scare my father, so I'm going to send a hint that it's really me. He should believe my brothers aren't lying because they lied before. Right? And he buys it. Like, how does Yaakov buy it? Like, it seems too abstract, too subtle, right? To come up with something else, right? So the answer is that it wasn't just the word wagon and Egla. It was the message. What is the message of the Egla? The message of the Egla Rufa is that you have, there's a number of mitzvahs that we have to do. We have to bury the dead. We have to take care of the sick. We have to clothe the naked. And we have to accompany people when they leave us. And the Gemara says that of all of those mitzvahs, one of the most important ones is to accompany people when they leave you. Why is that? Not just because of their safety, but because if you go to visit someone, right, and they treat you with respect. It's your friend, and you don't need special respect, but they treat you with respect. They're glad you came. They prepare a room for you. They don't just wait till you show up. They have something for you to eat and drink when you come, and when you leave, they tell you how much they appreciate your coming, and they don't want you to leave, so they walk with you a little bit, right? That gives you dignity, right? Because you could have the same visit, and the person's too busy for you, and they don't have time to visit with you, and they don't, they didn't set up anything for you. There's a room, here's some sheets, you can make a bed, you have a place to stay. I'm glad you're here, but I just don't have time. Do you feel like you're a schnorrer, right? You don't feel with any dignity. Mm-hmm. So the mitzvah of the Egla Rufa teaches us the significance of accompanying people. That is, giving dignity to people, treating people with dignity. Right? So Yosef was sending the message to his father that of all of the mitzvahs, the mitzvah of accompanying a person and giving them this dignity is the most important, which the Talmud says is true. It is the most important. And that message is what what Yaakov heard from Yosef. That's something an Egyptian would not have known. An Egyptian wouldn't have done that. The Egyptians were corrupt people. They had, they had everything. They had anything they wanted. They had the most powerful nation in the world. They wanted something from another country, they could just take over the country. They didn't care about other people and other things, but the Hebrews did. So that was the real message that he was sending his father, about the dignity of a person. Right? And then his father knew it was him. That's how he understood who it was, because he got that message from him. And it's an important message for us to hear as well, because it tells us the significance. Okay, now we have at the bottom of 257. So it says that Israel set out with all that he had. He came to Beersheba, where he slaughtered sacrifices. And God came to him and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he says, here I am. And on 259, and he says, I'm the God of your father. Have no fear of going down to Egypt, for you will be a great nation. I'll descend with you to Egypt. I shall also surely bring you up, and Joseph shall place his hands on your eyes. Right? So in other words, he's telling him, don't be afraid to go down there. It's a difficult thing. You're not in Israel anymore. You're in another country, but in the end, it's very important. It's necessary, and we have to. It's a positive thing. You're going to go down there. Things are going to happen, but you're going to come out a great nation, right? So go and do this. And Joseph will put his hand over your eyes. That's a funny expression. Simply, we think it means that he's going to. When a person dies, Jewish law says you should close their eyes. If I had the privilege or misfortune, depending on the situation, of being with someone when they passed away, one of the things you do is you close their eyes for them, out of dignity for the person. So it says that Yosef he says he will cover your eyes, right? He'll put his hand over your eyes. That means that you'll die, but you'll die with your family, with dignity, and Joseph will be there for you. But it's a funny expression, because we find in Jewish law that we have such an idea of covering our eyes. We cover our eyes when we say the Shema. You see people do that, and it's a very important aspect, because what we're doing when we cover our eyes, say the Shema, is that we're showing that it's not enough to say the Shema. You have to also concentrate on what you're doing. When you cover your eyes, you're getting rid of all types of things that could distract you, right? So you cover your eyes beforehand, and you concentrate on the words, and you say the words. The words of Shema are basically a radical concept in the ancient world, is that there's only one God. Now, for us, that's not radical. Most people in the world today, we understand, believe in one God. But that's only because we taught them this. The world believed in many gods. There are religions today that still believe in many gods. But the Greeks, the Romans, right, they had whole things, the god of this, and the god of this, and this god marries that one, and that one has an affair with that one. All kinds of stuff, all these gods, right? We believe in one God. This concept of the unity of God, and that God is all-powerful, that there is no power in the world other than God, right, is an important message for us to understand. That whatever we're doing, we have to realize that it's not that, you can't say something like, religion is religion, but business is business, right? You can't say that, because everything comes from God. Everything is in God's power. None of it is just simply happens. It's not like, that God is powerful and the richest man in the world is powerful, right? It's not. God is powerful, period. The richest man's power is only God allowing him to do things, right? That really is God doing it. There is no power other than God in the world. Everything is God, right? There's no authority than God. And this is a message that we need to know, and a message that God was saying to him by Joseph putting his hands over Jacob's eyes. He was conveying this message that even though Joseph was sent away for all these years, and he had to live among corrupt people, he lived among idol worshippers, he lived among people who had no concept of marriage, who had no concept of ownership. They just did whatever they wanted to do. Nevertheless, Joseph was still a person who understood that all power comes from God, that ultimately that's where we get our authority. And God says the Jews have to go to Egypt, and God says the Jews will come out a great nation, and that's going to happen. So when he says that Joseph will put his hands over your eyes, that's God's way of telling him that Joseph will carry on with the Jewish traditions. Because even though he lived with these corrupted people, he didn't change. He still was the same person that Yaakov saw he would be. Because what is a father afraid of? His son disappears, right? He could be dead. Okay, so he's not dead. Then he's going to be raised by these corrupt people. right? And he's going to have different ideas and different beliefs and different ways of doing things. Imagine, out of the risk of being incorrect politically, my mother used to tell me when she was a child in Germany that they used to threaten her that if you're not good, that the gypsies will steal you.
Yeah.
Right? Now I don't know much about gypsies, but they believed this, and you can imagine though that you have this. My mother's a 5-year-old Jewish girl when the war started, right? So before the war, they tell her this, and she believed it. Because she told me when she was an adult, she believed this, and imagine it happened. So rather than my mother being raised by a Jewish family and ending up here in America, and my coming here, she was raised by gypsies. How different her life would have been. How different her ethics would have been. Her lifestyle. I have no idea if gypsies steal people. I would doubt that all of them do. But she's raised by a family that stole her. So you can imagine they're probably not the most righteous people, right? This specific family. So on that basis, she would. She'll be raised differently, and you see the difference. So Yaakov is afraid Yosef is being raised from the time he was an adolescent till today in Egypt, a corrupt Egypt. And so therefore God's saying to him, Yosef will put his hand over your eyes. And just as you put your hand on your eyes when you say the Shema, to realize all the power comes from God and there's only one God, so Yosef is the same. He will continue with the same belief. That's what he's saying to him here. We then go on at the end of this to a list of all of the various people who went down to Egypt, right? And how they go down. Now we know that 69 people went down to Egypt. 70 of them entered Egypt. We're told that Moshe's mother Miriam was born as they entered the gates. So she was Yocheved, right? His mother Yocheved was born as she entered the gates, which means she was on one hand still born like Israel, and also born in Egypt. Like she was in both sides. So that's how 70 people got there, but only 69 left. And we have here a meeting with Pharaoh and Yaakov. If you look at the bottom of 263, then Joseph brought Jacob his father and presented him to Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? And Jacob answers Pharaoh, the days of life of my soldiers have been 130 years. And then he tells him how terrible his life was. Right? He says, these have been the years of my life, and I've not even gotten as old as my forefathers. So the first thing is, you imagine this, here Yaakov, who's like a king, right? Okay, not as powerful as Pharaoh in the way of the world, but he's a king. He comes down to see Pharaoh. He's introduced to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, hey, how old are you? Imagine that. Hey, like Obama comes to see Harper, and he comes in, and Harper looks at him and says, how old are you? Like the first thing he says to him, how old are you? Like, what could it have been about Yaakov that Pharaoh would have dropped all diplomacy and just said that? Now, Pharaoh is the most powerful guy. He could do whatever he wants, but he certainly had a certain royalty about him. I don't think it was normal for him to say, who dressed you today? What kind of look at your tie. You got eggs on your tie. Like, he wouldn't say that to somebody when they walk in. He says to Yaakov, how old are you? Like, you look so old. How old are you? So he tells him how old he is, right? And so the commentaries say that he's punished for this. Yaakov looked so old because Yaakov said, I had such a terrible life. And the Medrash says, he said that, Esau tried to kill me. I had to go live with Lavan, who was always tricking me, gave me the wrong wife, right? Then I have children, and my daughter gets kidnapped and raped, and my son gets taken away from me, right? I have a terrible life, right? And he as much as says it, that that I had such a hard life. And the commentaries say that because of it, God shortened his life. And interestingly enough, I don't have the number in front of me, I'm sorry to say it. It's probably in here somewhere in the Rashi. The number of years his life was shortened. But they say that if you count the words from his answer to Pharaoh to the end of the sentence, each word is a year of his life. Because he says, I had such a terrible life. Esau came after me, and all these things happened to me. So God says, every complaint you have, every word, is going to take a year off your life because you're it's not right. He says, that's what you say. Who saved you from Esau? I did. Who saved you from Lavan? I did. Who gave you the right wife in the end? I did. So what are you saying? You had such a terrible life. It's like, we say it all the time. Somebody passes away, and you say, why did God do that? He took him away from me. Took her away from me, right? You say, and that's a reasonable thing. It's not unreasonable, right? We can think that way. But what about thinking, maybe this person was supposed to die 20 years ago, and God made it possible for them to be with you another 20 years, right? We never think that. Or when something good happens, people don't go around saying how great God is. Only when something bad happens, they say, why does God do that? You said, I can't believe in a God who allows children to die. How about, can you believe in a God who allows children to live for 5 years instead of not live at all? That giving a blessing to its mother that for all these years that she has a child, and then she doesn't. Right? I understand it's tough, but let's look at it. It works both ways. Right? That's what Hashem's saying to Yaakov. You had Esau, I saved you from Esau. Your daughter got raped, I got her back for you. Right? All of these things, God was there for him. So it's two ways of looking at it. Because of it, he lost a year of his life. But if you add up the number of days, and it would make much more sense if I remember the number offhand, it doesn't add up. The number of words in the sentence don't add up to the number of years he lost. However, it depends where you go back to. And if you actually go back to where Pharaoh says to Jacob, how old are you? Then it does add up. And why would we include that? So the commentaries say that the reason you'd include that is because Yaakov, when Pharaoh said to him, how old are you? It's because Yaakov looked like an old man. Like, what's the difference between an old man and a guy who just happens to be old? The difference is their disposition. Like, an old man walks slow, and he's grouchy, and he's got nothing, doesn't want to do anything. Right? A man who happens to be old but acts differently, right? He still wants to learn. He still wants to be productive as much as he can. He still likes to be around people, right? They're different personality. Yaakov looked like a grouchy old man, and Pharaoh says, like, oh my God, I just met Joseph. Joseph's your son, not your grandson. How old are you? Right? So Yaakov allowed himself to have a disposition like that was cranky, that was old, right? That's according to this commentary. And therefore Pharaoh asked him that question. And not just because of what he said is he punished, because he allowed himself to do that, he was punished. That's the bottom line, that he's like that. And that's why we have this whole story in here about this going on. And he goes on to talk about, all the things that happened to him. Right? And then, of course, they settle in Goshen, the land set aside for them. And now at this point, all of the Jews have come down to Egypt. And we're going to be beginning soon, right, the whole idea of the slavery, what happens. Right now, you still have the brothers are alive, right? You have all of the people from Israel are still alive. Jacob is still alive. Joseph is still alive. And everything is going well because Joseph is powerful. So he makes sure that his family is taken care of, and he makes sure that they can still observe Judaism, and he makes sure that they're allowed to live a good life, right, in this land. Slowly, as Joseph dies and the other brothers die and that whole generation dies, the Jews start to assimilate. This becomes our first real example of Jews in dispersion, right, no longer living in a Jewish country, and the effect the country has on us, right? And we see that starting in the next few weeks, you'll start to see anti-Semitism pop up, where the Egyptians are afraid of the Jews, that the Jews are going to come in and take us over. They're not going to go to war with us. They're just going to take us over, right? They're going to take over the economy. They're going to take over, Hollywood. They're going to take over Wall Street, and then we're just stuck, right? So and this is the beginning of it. Right now, you have the old Jews coming over from Europe who are still religious and still following the old ways, and then their children aren't necessarily that way, and that's going to come up in the next few weeks. So we'll stop with that here.